Hello, my little rutabagas. I wonder what you're doing right now to fill your time. Maybe you've learned something new. Like in this story, my naughty little sister does knitting. I can't wait to find out what happens. My naughty little sister does knitting from My Naughty Little Sister, a Treasury Collection by Dorothy Edwards, illustrated by Shirley Hughes. One day when I was a little girl and my naughty little sister was another little girl, a kind lady came to live next door to us. This kind lady's really true name was Mrs. Jones, but my little sister always called her Mrs. Coco Jones. Do you know why she called her that? Shall I tell you? Well, it was because Mrs. Coco Jones used to give my naughty little sister a cup of cocoa every morning. Yes, every single morning when it was 11 o'clock, Mrs. Coco Jones used to bang hard on her kitchen wall with the handle of her floor brush, as our kitchen was right the other side of the wall. My naughty little sister could hear very well and would bang and bang back to show that she was quite ready. Then my little sister would go into Mrs. Coco Jones's house to drink cocoa with her. Wasn't that a nice idea? My little sister used to go in to see Mrs. Coco Jones so much that Mr. Coco Jones made a little low gate between his garden and our father's garden so that my little sister could pop in without having to go all round the front of the houses each time. Mr. Coco Jones made a nice little archway over the gate and planted a little rose tree to climb over it, especially for her. Wasn't she a fortunate child? So you see, Mrs. Coco Jones was a very great friend. Well now, Mrs. Coco Jones was a lady who was always knitting and knitting. And as she hadn't any little boys and girls of her own, she used to knit a lot of lovely woolies for my naughty little sister and for me. She knitted us red jumpers and blue jumpers and yellow jumpers and red caps and blue caps and yellow caps to match. And she also knitted a blue jumper for Rosie Primrose, who was my naughty little sister's favorite doll. And when she had finished all the caps and jumpers, she made us lots of pairs of socks. So every time we saw Mrs. Coco, she always had a bag of wool and a lot of clicky needles. Sometimes when Mrs. Coco Jones wanted the wool wound up, she would ask my naughty little sister to hold it for her, and that fidgety child would drop it and tangle it until Mr. Coco Jones used to say, "It looks to me as if you will be doing knotting, not knitting, with that lot," to Mrs. Coco. And my funny little sister would laugh and laugh because she thought it was very funny to say knotting like that. Now, one day, Mrs. Coco Jones said, "Would you like to learn to knit?" to my naughty little sister. "Would you like to learn to knit?" she asked my little sister. And my little sister said, "Not very much." Then Mrs. Coco Jones said, "Well, but think of all the nice things you could make for everyone. You could knit Christmas presents and birthday presents all by yourself." Then my naughty little sister thought it would be rather nice to learn to knit, so she said, "All right then, Mrs. Coco Jones, would you please teach me?" So Mrs. Coco Jones lent her a pair of rather bendy needles, and she gave her some wool, and she showed her how to knit. So carefully, my little sister learned to put the wool round the needle, and carefully to bring it out and make a stitch, and carefully to make another until she could really truly knit. Then my naughty little sister was very pleased because she had a good idea. She thought that as Mr. Coco Jones had made her such a nice little gate, she would knit him a scarf for his birthday, because his old scarf had got all moth-holy. The naughty little baby moths had eaten bits of his scarf and made holes in it. So my little sister thought he would like a new one very much. She didn't tell anyone about it, not even Mrs. Coco Jones. She wanted it to be a real secret. Well now, Mrs. Coco had given my little sister all her odds and endsy bits of wool, and the red bits and the blue bits and the yellow bits from our jumpers, and some gray and purple and white and black and brown bits as well. So my little sister thought she would make a beautiful scarf. She went secretly into corners to knit this beautiful scarf for Mr. Coco Jones's birthday. Wasn't she a clever child? She kept it carefully hidden all the time she wasn't making it. She hid it in a lot of funny places, too. She hid it under her pillow and in the coal shed and behind the settee and in the flower tub. But most of the time she was knitting and knitting to have it made in time, so that when Mr. Coco Jones's birthday did come, it was quite ready and quite finished. It was a very pretty scarf because of all the pretty colors my little sister had used, and although it was a bit coaly and a bit flowery here and there, it still looked very lovely, and Mr. Coco Jones was very pleased with it. He said, "It's the best scarf I've ever had." Then my little sister told him all about how she had knitted it, and she showed him some holes in it too, where the stitches had dropped, and Mr. Coco Jones said they would make nice homes for the baby moths to live in anyway. So my little sister was glad she had dropped the stitches. Then Mr. Coco Jones said that as it was the very nicest scarf he had ever had knitted for him, it would be a shame to waste it by wearing it every day. So he said he would get Mrs. Coco to put it away for him for high days and holidays. So Mrs. Coco wrapped it up very neatly and nicely in blue laundry paper, and she let my little sister put it away in Mr. Coco's drawer for him. And Mr. Coco wore his old scarf for every day until Mrs. Coco had time to knit him another one. That was a very sweet story, and it's always good to try new things. I'm glad that my naughty little sister, even though she said no first, decided in the end to learn to knit. It's hard, don't get me wrong, but it's fun too, to learn something new and to take on new challenges. I wanted to let you know that there's some words that might confuse you. You can always ask somebody ask somebody, but I thought I would tell you. But you might know from context clues what a jumper is. In the book, it reads, "She knitted us red jumpers and blue jumpers and yellow jumpers and red caps and blue caps and yellow caps to match." So what do you think a jumper is? That's right, a sweater. And there was something else, but can't remember what it is. That's okay. Can't always remember. I'll remember it later. All right. Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell.